The water was still when the detective pressed play. A man's voice came from the phone speaker. Calm. Too calm. Hello. I'm calling about the life insurance for my wife. I want to be sure the full amount is paid if something happens. How long is the contestability period again? The room went quiet. The detective looked up at the grieving man sitting across the table. He had his hands folded, eyes red. He did not blink. Outside the interview room, rain began to beat the windows. Another voice, this time from the recording, spoke again, an agent explaining rules and dates. The timestamp on the call was 1 week before the woman died. The detective paused the audio. Why were you asking about the money before she died? The man's jaw moved once, like he was chewing a thought. Then the door opened behind the detective. A forensic tech walked in, holding a plastic bag with a small silver item inside, a bathtub drain cover, bent and scratched. We found this under the cabinet, she said. It doesn't look like an accident. The man's hands finally twitched. He glanced at the drain cover, then at the phone that held his own voice. The detective stood. Sir, he said, I need you to come with us. Ada clapped with both hands over her head. The bell rang once, twice, 3 times, and everyone in the hospital hallway cheered. She had beaten cancer. The nurses hugged her. Her doctor smiled. Her best friend, Zainab, cried and laughed at the same time, saying, You did it, Ada. You did it. Outside, the sky over Lagos was bright and kind. Ada breathed in deep, like she was tasting a new life. For months, her world had been small. For white walls, slow drips in her arm, the steady beep of machines. Now, she could smell roasted corn from a street cart. She could hear hawkers calling and bodas honking. She could feel the sun on her face. She pressed her hand to her chest and whispered, Thank you. The first weeks at home were quiet and soft. Ada slept without fear. She learned how to cook without feeling sick. She walked to the market and picked out ripe mangoes with her own hands. She played gospel music while she cleaned, and she danced with a broom. Her hair, cut short by treatment, grew back in little curls she liked to pat flat and then fluff again. At church, the pastor asked her to share her testimony. She stood at the front and told him about the night she thought she would not see morning, and how the nurses joked with her, and how the prayer group spoke her name over and over until it felt like a shield. Everyone clapped. When she sat down, a man from the back row stood up and spoke to her in the courtyard after service. He had kind eyes. He said his name was Kola. They began to talk after Sunday service, then on the phone during the week. He said he worked in car sales and sometimes insurance too, just side hustle. He said he'd also lost someone, his mother, to sickness, so he knew how fear could sit inside a house like a shadow. He did not push when Ada got tired. He sent yam and plantain to her door with silly notes taped on the nylon bags. For the strongest woman I know, one note said. Ada smiled at the handwriting and wondered what it would feel like to trust again. Their first date was simple. Fried fish by the water and a slow walk where it was safe and bright. Kola wore a white shirt and clean sneakers. He listened more than he talked. When Ada told him her body still ached, he said, Then we walk slow. And they did. He held out his arm for her. When the ground dipped, he laughed at her stories about TV shows she watched during chemo. He made her feel seen, not like a patient, but like Ada. Time moved forward, and with it came both quiet mornings and busy days. Some evenings, Kola would cook jollof rice in her small kitchen and act as if he was a star chef. He would taste a spoon, frown like a judge, and say, It needs more dance, then spin the spoon like a baton. Ada would laugh until her sides hurt. On one of those evenings, he brought up insurance. Babe, he said, washing plates, sleeves rolled up. Cancer is gone, yes, but life is life. We should plan. I can help you set up a small life policy. It's normal, just to be safe. Ada dried a bowl and felt the old fear stir. I don't want to think about that, she said. Kola kissed her forehead. I know, but it's just a paper shield. For the future, he dropped it and picked a different topic, like he always did when she got tense. A month later, he asked again, but softer. I added you to my own savings goals, he said. It would make me happy to know you're covered too. I can do the paperwork. Ada thought of the hospital bills, the long dark nights, the prayers. She thought of what Zainab said, that fear is loud after a storm, but it quiets when you build again. Maybe this was building. Okay, she said, but small, nothing big. Cola smiled, big and grateful. He hugged her and said, nothing big. Ada's world grew wider. She visited her mother in Abeokuta and slept in her childhood room. She planted hibiscus in a tin bucket by her door. She joined a small support group for cancer survivors and listened to women like her. When they spoke about their new fears, like any small pain might be the sickness again, Ada nodded and took their hands. We are not broken, she told them. We are here. When Kola asked her to marry him, he did it on a quiet Monday, when there was no crowd to watch. He came to her house with fresh bread and a ring tucked inside the bag. He knelt on her rug and said, I want to be your soft place to land. Ada cried and said yes. It felt like a promise that the worst was behind her. The wedding was small, simple, and bright. Ada wore a white dress that hugged her shoulders. Kola wore a blue suit. Zainab danced like the floor was on fire. There was puff puff and meat pie and fauna. People clapped when Ada and Kola fed each other cake. Her mother wiped her eyes with the corner of her wrapper and whispered, Thank God. The first weeks of marriage were sweet. They learned each other's habits. Ada liked to sleep with a fan humming. Kola liked the room dark, like a cinema. Ada left notes on the fridge. Kola sent messages with too many emojis. He always knew where her slippers had fallen and put them by the bed. He teased her about how she argued with TV characters. She teased him about how he ironed everything, even handkerchiefs. But small cracks can hide in sweet walls. It started with money. Kola's car sales went up and down. Some weeks, he came home smiling. Some weeks, his shoulders were tight. Babe, I'll sort it, he said. Just a slow month. When Ada asked about the insurance paper, he said he had handled it. You are covered. I'm the beneficiary, but only because we're family now. It's normal. It's what husbands do. Ada nodded because she wanted to believe the best. Another small crack. Kola did not like how often Zainab stopped by. We need our space, he said. You need rest. People bring stress. Ada said, Zainab is my sister in everything but blood. Kola smiled and said, I love Zainab too, just fewer drop-ins. He laughed it off. Ada tried to balance peace and friendship. For a while, life settled again. Ada went for her checkup and came home with good results. All clear, the doctor said. She printed a report and stuck it to the fridge with a magnet that said, Hope. She and Kola made plans to visit the beach. They talked about starting a small catering business because Ada's soups made everyone ask for more. They even argued about silly things like which side of the bed belonged to who. It felt like real life, imperfect and warm. The day of the crime began like any other, with a less extreme, calm morning. Ada woke early, prayed, and opened the windows. The sky was a soft gray. A light rain had washed the dust off the leaves. She made pap and akra and left a plate for Kola. He kissed her cheek and said he would be late, as he had a client who needed a car. Don't wait up, he said. I might be long. Ada spent the day doing little things. She watered the hibiscus. She called her mother. She watched a funny show and laughed until her stomach hurt. In the evening, when the rain began again, she ran a warm bath to ease her joints. Steam filled the small bathroom. She added drops of lavender oil to make the room smell like peace. Kola came home just as the bath was ready. He smiled and hugged her from behind. Long day, he said. I'm tired. Ada said, I saved you some stew. He said he would eat later. He took off his shoes and sat on the bed, scrolling on his phone. Ada went into the bathroom and sank into the warm water with a sigh. Her body relaxed. She closed her eyes and let her head rest on the towel she had folded against the tub. Kola stood in the doorway, a shape in the fog. You okay? He asked. Ada said, eyes still closed. He stepped inside. The fan hummed in the bedroom. Rain tapped the window. The house was a tiny world of soft sounds. Later, neighbors would say they heard a thud. Later, the detective would find the bent drain cover. Later, the phone company would show a call made to the insurance number a week before. But in this moment, it was only the soft splash of water and Ada's breathing. "Babe," Cola said, voice low. "I'll bring you a towel." He stepped out. He stepped back in. He knelt by the tub. He put his hands in the water like he was testing the heat. Ada opened her eyes when she felt the shift in the water. "Cola," she asked. He did not answer. The smell of lavender seemed too sweet. In simple stories, evil looks like a mask you can tell at once. In real life, evil can look like a face you have kissed 100 times. Cola's hands moved. One pressed down on Ada's shoulder. Another pushed against the back of her head, gentle at first, like a playful dunk. Ada laughed once, surprised. "Stop," she said. He did not stop. Water filled her ears. The world went muffled. She tried to push up, but his weight held. Her hands found his wrists. She kicked. The tub shuddered. A small soap dish fell and cracked, a sharp sound swallowed by the fan and the rain. "Please," she tried to say, but water rushed into her mouth. It tasted like metal and salt and the oil she had poured in to make the bath smell nice. Her chest burned. The room spun. Cola's jaw was tight. His arms were strong. He had made plans. He had made calls. He had waited for a night like this. Rain to soften sounds. Fatigue to slow her. A bath to hide a crime. He pressed down. He did not look away. Ada's hand found the drain cover and grabbed it hard. It bent under her grip. She tried to hit him with it, but the metal slipped from her wet fingers and clinked under the cabinet. She fought. She fought because she had rung a bell that said she was alive, because she had planted a hibiscus that begged to bloom, because she had a mother who prayed her name at dawn, because Zainab would never forgive her if she let go. She fought as long as she could. The water stilled. For a moment, there was no sound but the fan in the bedroom and the rain against the window. Cola stayed there, breathing hard, hands shaking. He stared at the water as if it could speak back and tell him this was not real. Then he stood, wiped his face, and set the scene the way he had imagined it in his head during those long, crooked days. He dropped the soap into the tub. He pulled a towel down to make it look like she had reached for it and fallen. He stepped out and counted. 1, 2, 3. He picked up his phone. His voice on the emergency line was perfect. Frantic, but not too frantic. "My wife," he shouted. "She slipped. She's not breathing. Please, please hurry." He gave the address twice. He left the door open. He knelt by the tub and made a show of pushing on her chest, water lapping at his sleeves. He said her name over and over like a man who would never hurt the woman he loved. The ambulance siren cut through the rain. Neighbors peered from their doors. The paramedics moved fast, but their faces told the truth. They carried Ada out on a stretcher, and the small hibiscus by the door shook in the wet wind as if it wanted to reach out and grab her hand. Zainab arrived minutes later with her scarf thrown on wrong. She saw the sheet pulled over Ada's face and screamed like the sky had split. Cola held his head in his hands and did not look at anyone. He told the officer who took notes that Ada had been dizzy after her treatments sometimes. He said the bath was too hot. He said he tried to save her. The officer nodded, writing. "We're sorry, sir," he said. "We'll take it from here." But not everyone accepted the first story. One of the paramedics stayed back, looking at the bathroom. She noticed the soap dish cracked on the floor, but no soap suds around the tub. She noticed the drain cover missing. She noticed a faint, long scratch on the tub edge that looked like a fingernail mark. She folded these small thoughts in her mind like clothes and carried them with her. By midnight, the rain had stopped. The house was quiet again. The fan hummed. The hibiscus stood still. Cola sat at the dining table and stared at the wall. His phone buzzed once, a message from an unknown number. "Claim documents ready when you are." He turned the phone face down, then picked it up, then turned it face down again. Across town, a detective named Teo got the call. Possible accidental drowning. Young woman. Cancer survivor. Newly married. He closed his eyes. He had a sister who had beaten cancer, too. He had watched her ring the same bell in a different hospital. He felt something heavy settle in his chest, a weight that was not just duty. He put on his coat and left his small flat. The night air smelled like wet dust. As he drove, he thought about all the stories people told when death came too fast. He thought about the quiet details that do not shout but whisper the truth. He thought about how grief can make it hard to see straight, and how some people count on that. The crime had come like a wave over a calm shore. It had snatched life away and left noise, questions, and a broken soap dish on a bathroom floor. By dawn, the sun would rise and people would go to work, and children would tie their shoelaces, and Ada's mother would sit on her bed and say her daughter's name into the empty air. Detective Teo parked outside the house as the sky lifted from black to blue. He walked to the door, notebook ready. He looked at the hibiscus, at the water still caught in its leaves. He stepped inside. He did not yet know about the bent drain cover under the cabinet. He did not yet know about the phone call to the insurance company made 1 week before. He did not yet know that the face of a man who looked like a soft place to land could also be a hard hand in water. But he would know soon, and when he did, he would not let it go. Detective Teo had been in many houses like this before, too quiet, too clean in the wrong places, the kind of quiet that felt staged. He stood in the small living room, eyes moving from the wedding photos on the wall to the damp footprints on the tile. Cola sat on the couch, head down, elbows on his knees. A uniformed officer spoke softly. Husband says she slipped in the bath. Neighbor confirmed they heard nothing unusual. Paramedics called an accident, but the officer glanced toward the bathroom. One of the medics thinks it doesn't sit right. Teo walked in slowly, taking in details. The bathroom smelled faintly of lavender oil, but the scent felt too strong, like it had been poured out recently. The towel on the rack was dry, which didn't make sense if Ada had been reaching for it. He noticed a small soap dish on the floor, cracked clean in two. The drain cover was missing. He crouched by the tub. The water had been drained, but there was a faint ring around the edges. His fingers brushed aside. There was a long scratch, deep enough to feel. He pictured a fingernail scraping desperately against the enamel. From the corner of his eye, Teo saw Cola watching him. When their eyes met, Cola quickly looked away. "Sir," Teo said, walking into the living room, "I'm sorry for your loss, but I have some questions." Cola's voice was low. "I've told the other officer everything. She was tired, maybe dizzy. She liked hot baths. I heard a sound, ran and tried CPR, but..." He spread his hands helplessly. Teo nodded slowly. "You said you were in the bedroom?" "Yes." "And you didn't hear her call out?" Cola shook his head. "No, just a thud." Teo wrote something in his notebook. He noticed Cola's hands, steady. Too steady for someone who just lost his wife of a few weeks. The rest of the day was a mix of calm and chaos. Ada's mother arrived, her face lined with disbelief. She kept asking for her daughter, as if someone would open a door and bring her out. Zainab was quieter, but her eyes burned when she looked at Cola. She was fine this morning, Zainab told Teo, laughing on the phone with me. She said they were going to the beach next weekend. She paused. She survived cancer. Do you know what that means? She fought like I've never seen anyone fight. And now you tell me she slipped in the bath. Teo nodded. I understand. By evening, he had the basic report. No force entry, no bruises noted at first glance except on Ada's upper arm, which would be from CPR attempts or from someone holding her down. No one had heard shouting. No signs of struggle outside the bathroom. But something kept gnawing at him. He'd been a detective long enough to know when a story didn't fit. People who survive death once don't tend to let it take them quietly. That night, Teo sat in his office, going through the medical examiner's preliminary notes. Cause of death, drowning, water in lungs. But the bruising on her arm not conclusive yet. Toxicology pending. He picked up the phone and called the insurance company listed in her personal file from the hospital, just to confirm if she had coverage. Yes, the agent said. A life policy was purchased 2 months ago. Beneficiary, her husband, Cola. Coverage amount, 20 million Nigerian nairas. Teyo's pen froze above the page. When exactly was this policy taken out? The agent checked. Effective date about 7 weeks ago. And there was a pause. There was also an inquiry call from the beneficiary last week, asking about payout rules in case of death. Teyo's jaw tightened. Send me the recording of that call. He sat back in his chair. Now he had motive. But motive was nothing without proof. Kola would deny it all. Neighbors hadn't heard a thing. There were no cameras in the house. If he was going to prove this was an accident, he'd have to dig deep. Find the cracks Kola couldn't cover, the one piece of evidence that would tip this whole thing over. As he shut his notebook, Teyo's phone buzzed. It was a forensic tech from the scene. We found something, she said, under the bathroom cabinet. Bent metal. Looks like a drain cover. And it has what might be blood under one edge. Teyo stared at the wall, thinking, a bent drain cover. A missing piece in a perfect story. If Ada had grabbed it hard enough to bend, maybe she left more than just fingerprints. Maybe she left her killer's name written in skin cells and scratches. The case had just shifted from an accident to something darker, and Kola didn't know it yet. Detective Teyo held the bent drain cover in a plastic evidence bag, turning it slowly in his hands. The metal was warped, as if it had been gripped with desperate strength. On one edge, barely visible, was a dark smudge that might have been rust or might have been blood. In his years on the job, Teyo had learned to pay attention to the smallest details. People could lie, scenes could be staged, but objects told the truth if you listened carefully. Get this to the lab, he told the forensic tech. I want DNA testing, and check for skin cells under the edges, both the victim's and anyone else's. She nodded and hurried off. The house was sealed as a crime scene now. Kola hadn't been arrested yet, but the tone had shifted. He'd been told not to leave town. When Teyo walked back into the living room, Kola was pacing. Am I under arrest? He demanded. No, Teyo said evenly. Not yet. Then why are you treating me like a criminal? Teyo didn't answer directly. Where were you between 5 p.m. and 8 p.m. yesterday? Kola exhaled sharply. I told you I was home most of the time. Went out for a few minutes to pick up something from the car, then came back. Anyone see you? He hesitated. No. Teyo made a note. Did your wife have any enemies? Anyone who want to harm her? Kola's lips pressed into a thin line. No. She was loved by everyone. Except maybe that friend, Zainab. She was always in our business. The way he said it was too quick, too eager to shift suspicion. Teyo filed that away, too. The next morning brought the first false lead. A neighbor, Mrs. Bello, came forward saying she'd seen a man in a hoodie lurking near the compound gate around the time of Ada's death. For a few hours, the focus shifted. Teyo and his partner combed through street camera footage from the nearby junction, but the man turned out to be a food delivery driver who had been lost and checking his phone for directions. Dead end. The pressure was mounting. The chief wanted updates. The media had started to pick up the story. Not because they thought it was murder, but because the tragedy of a cancer survivor dying so soon after recovery made headlines. Tragic accident. One article called it. Teyo hated that phrase. By midweek, the lab results from the drain cover came back. The partial DNA profile on the underside matched Ada. But there was also a second partial sample. Male. It wasn't enough to make a legal slam dunk yet, but it proved one thing. Someone else's skin had been under a grip in her final moments. Teyo stared at the report. If it matched Kola, he'd have the first real physical link to the death. He called the lab. Fast-track comparison with the husband's DNA. Swab him today. That evening, Teyo went to speak to Zainab again. They met at a roadside suya stand. The air smelled of grilled meat and pepper. I told you before, she said. Ada was happy, but I don't know. Sometimes she'd go quiet when I asked about money. She said Kola was planning for the future. Teyo leaned in. Did she ever say anything about insurance? Zainab's eyes narrowed. Yes, she told me. He wanted her to get a policy. I told her it was too soon in the marriage for that. She laughed and said, maybe he just loves me enough to plan ahead. She ever talk about feeling unsafe? Zainab hesitated, then nodded. 2 weeks ago, she told me something strange. She said she caught him standing in the bathroom doorway while she was bathing, just staring. She joked about it, but her voice wasn't right when she told me. Teo's pen froze mid-scribble. Did she ever say why she stayed with him? Zainab's voice cracked, because she thought she'd already fought her biggest battle. She thought everything after cancer would be easier. Back at the station, Teo's phone buzzed with a message from the lab. DNA match confirmed. Second sample on drain cover matches cola. Teo exhaled slowly. The case was no longer built on suspicion. It had weight now. But he knew better than to celebrate too soon. Defense lawyers could argue the DNA transfer happened some other way. He needed more. He needed something that would prove beyond doubt that Cola's hands were the last thing holding Ada under that water. The next morning, Cola showed up at the station. Uninvited. He walked into the lobby in a crisp shirt, smelling of cologne. "I want my wife's body released," he said flatly. "We need to bury her." Teo stepped forward. "We can do that soon, but I have more questions first." Cola smirked. "Ask. I have nothing to hide." Teo tilted his head. "Then you won't mind telling me why you called your wife's life insurance company a week before she died, asking when you could collect?" The smirk faltered. "You're twisting things," Cola said. "I was just making sure everything was in order." She was still sickly. "She was cancer-free," Teo cut in, "and you stood in that bathroom while she fought for her life. The question is," he leaned closer, "will you confess now, or will I drag the truth out piece by piece?" Cola's jaw tightened. "You have nothing?" Teo's phone buzzed in his pocket. He glanced at the screen and saw a message from forensics. "You might want to see this. Ada had defensive bruising and skin cells under her nails. If those matched Cola, the case would explode wide open. And Cola had no idea how close the net was tightening." Detective Teo sat in the forensics lab, the hum of the machines filling the space. The technician slid a file across the desk. "Bruising pattern on the victim's upper arms is consistent with someone gripping from above," she said. "Finger marks, 5 on one arm, for partial on the other. And under her fingernails, we found epithelial skin cells. Male, DNA matches the husband." Teo flipped through the photos. Close-up shots of Ada's arms showed dark, oval-shaped bruises, some already deepening in color. The fingernail scrapings were damning. Physical proof she had fought back. "How long before we can certify cause of death as homicide?" he asked. The tech hesitated. "Officially, we still have to cross-check the rest of the evidence. But off the record, she didn't slip. Someone held her down." Teo left the lab with a file under his arm, feeling the weight of the case shift from suspicion to near certainty. But he knew the next part would be harder. Building the story airtight enough to stand in court. He needed to reconstruct Cola's plan. Why he did it, how he did it, and most importantly, when he decided to kill Ada. That afternoon, he visited the insurance company in person. The office was cold from overworked air conditioning. The manager, a neat woman in glasses, sat across from him. "Yes, the husband called last week," she confirmed, tapping on her computer. "He specifically asked about the contestability period, meaning how soon after policy starts he could file a claim and still be paid." "Did that strike you as unusual?" She pursed her lips. "Extremely. We get inquiries, sure, but usually from people managing multiple policies. Here it was pointed." She clicked a few keys and pulled up the call recording. Teo put on the headphones. The first few seconds made his skin crawl. Cola's voice was steady, polite, almost bored. "I just want to confirm, if something happens to my wife within the first year, will the payout still be valid?" The agent on the recording explained the rules. Cola chuckled softly. "Good to know. Life is unpredictable. Teo pulled off the headphones. "Send me a copy of that recording." Meanwhile, Cola was moving carefully. Too carefully. He avoided calls from certain relatives. He stayed off social media. When he did go out, it was to meet with his lawyer, something Teo learned from a surveillance tale. The lawyer's presence meant one thing. Cola knew he was a prime suspect. The investigation hit a snag 3 days later when the prosecution office asked for more conclusive evidence before proving an arrest. Teo felt the pressure in his chest. He had the DNA under her nails, the bent drain cover, the bruising, the insurance call, and motive, but each piece alone could be argued away. Find the missing link, his chief said, the one thing he can't explain. That night, Teo went back to the crime scene one more time. He walked through the room slowly, replaying the timeline in his head. The bath, the towel, the soap dish. He crouched near where the soap dish had fallen. Something about it had bothered him from day one. The pieces lay near the opposite wall, away from the tub, too far for an accidental drop. If Ada had been struggling, maybe she had thrown it. Or maybe it had been knocked during a violent movement. Teo took photos, measuring the distance. Then his flashlight beam caught something faint on the wall above the tub, a smear invisible under normal light, but reflecting under the beam. He swabbed it himself and sent it to the lab. 2 days later, the results came back. It was blood, Ada's. That blood on the wall placed her head at a certain angle during the struggle, one she couldn't have reached if she'd simply fallen. It told the real story. She'd been forced downward, hard enough for her head to hit the wall before being held under. Teo gathered the team in the briefing room. Here's what happened, he said, pointing to a diagram of the bathroom. Cola comes in while Ada is bathing. He kneels beside the tub, presses her head and shoulders down. She grabs a drain cover, bending it. She scratches his arms. DNA under her nails confirms this. In the struggle, her head hits the wall. Blood smear matches her type. She's held under until she drowns. Then he stages a scene, drops the soap dish, positions a towel, calls emergency services pretending to help. He looked at each officer in turn. We have motive, life insurance payout of 20 million Nigerian nairas. We have premeditation, recorded call to the insurance company a week before. And we have physical evidence tying him to her final struggle. There was a silence, heavy with the weight of the case. Bring him in, the chief said. The arrest team went to Cola's house that evening. He opened the door in a T-shirt, clearly not expecting them. What is this? He asked, trying to sound annoyed, not afraid. Teo held up the warrant. Kola Adeyemi, you're under arrest for the murder of your wife, Ada Adeyemi. Cola's face went blank for a split second, just long enough for Teo to know he'd heard the truth in the words. You're making a mistake, Cola said, but his voice was thinner now. Teo stepped closer. No, Cola. The mistake was thinking no one would look closer. As they cuffed him, Cola looked past Teo at the small hibiscus plant still by the door. For the first time since the night of Ada's death, he looked unsure, like a man who had built his plan on still water, only to watch it ripple. But Teo knew the fight wasn't over. The real battle would be in court, and he had one more lead to chase, a possible witness who had not yet come forward. The morning after Cola's arrest, Detective Teo sat at his desk with a fresh cup of coffee and the uneasy knowledge that this case was far from won. In Nigeria, murder trials were long battles. One misstep, one gap in evidence, and a killer could walk free. He had the physical proof. He had the insurance call. But what he didn't have yet was a witness who could stand before a judge and say, I saw something. That was when his phone buzzed with a call from an unknown number. Detective Teo? The voice was low, nervous. Yes, who's this? This is Musa. I live 2 flats down from Ada and Cola. I think I heard something the night she died. Musa arrived at the station an hour later, thin and anxious, looking over his shoulder as though Cola might appear behind him. I didn't want trouble, Musa began. But when I heard he was arrested, I thought maybe what I know can help. Teo leaned forward. Tell me everything. Start from the beginning. Musa described that rainy night. I was coming back from night prayers. Around 8 p.m., I passed by their window. Bathroom window was half open because of the steam. I heard splashing, but not like bathing, more like fighting with water. Teo's pen moved quickly. Go on. Then I heard a woman's voice, Ada's voice, say, Cola, stop. Musa swallowed hard. It wasn't loud, but I heard it. After that, silence. Just the rain. Teo felt a surge of electricity in his chest. This was it, a living voice to back up the evidence. Will you testify to this in court? Musa hesitated. If I have police protection. You'll have it, Teo promised. Back at the forensics lab, another report came in, one that made the case even tighter. The bruises on Ada's arms matched the exact size and spacing of Cola's hands. The defensive scratches on his forearms, taken during his arrest, were healing wounds consistent with the night she died. Piece by piece, the puzzle was locking into place. That afternoon, Teo visited Ada's mother to update her. She sat in the living room, staring at her daughter's wedding photo. The hibiscus plant Ada had once loved sat by the window, its flowers already drooping. They said it was an accident, she whispered. It wasn't, Teo said gently. We have proof, and we have a witness. Her eyes filled with tears. Why? Why would he do this to her? For money, Teo said. His voice was steady, but inside he burned with the injustice of it. She nodded slowly. Then you must finish this, detective. Don't let him escape. The prosecution team met that evening. Teo laid out the case like a surgeon, exposing an organ. Motive: 20 million Nigerian Nairas insurance payout. Premeditation: the recorded insurance call a week before. Means: alone with her in the bathroom, no forced entry. Opportunity: time frame confirmed by neighbor's testimony. Evidence: DNA under her nails, bruising matching his hands, bent drain cover with his skin cells, blood smear on bathroom wall. Witness: Musa's statement hearing Ada say, Cola, stop. The lead prosecutor tapped the table. With this, we can push for a murder conviction. But she glanced at Teo. He has a skilled defense lawyer. Expect him to claim the bruises came from CPR, and the DNA under her nails is from normal contact. They can try, Teo said. We'll show the timeline. We'll show the insurance call. And we'll put the witness on the stand. 3 days before preliminary hearing, Cola's lawyer made a move, filing a motion to suppress the DNA evidence from the drain cover, claiming it had been contaminated at the scene. If the judge granted it, a key part of the case would vanish. Teo spent the next 48 hours pulling every chain of custody log, every photo of the scene, every statement from the forensic team. He rehearsed exactly how the evidence had been handled from the moment it left the bathroom to the lab sealed storage. When the hearing came, he stood beside the prosecutor as the defense tried to tear holes in their case. The judge leaned forward. Detective, are you confident the evidence was preserved correctly? Yes, my lord. Teo said, his voice firm. The chain of custody is unbroken. The evidence is intact. And it tells the truth that Kola Adeyemi killed his wife. The judge denied the defense's motion. The drain cover stayed in. That night, Teo sat alone in his office. The city outside was alive with noise, horns, street vendors, the hum of a million stories. But in this office, one story consumed him. He thought of Ada's life, how she had rung the cancer bell, planted her hibiscus, laughed with her friends, trusted a man who smiled while planning her death. And he thought of court, where all of this would come to light. But there was still one thing bothering him. Something small, something that didn't yet fit. Why had Kola chosen that night to act? The answer to that question, Teo felt, might reveal an even darker layer to crime, and he was about to find it. Detective Teo's question wouldn't let him sleep. Why that night? Kola had the policy for weeks. He had other nights where Ada was alone, vulnerable. Why wait until then? The next morning, he dug deeper into Kola's phone records, not just calls, but text messages and financial transactions. That's when he found it. A transfer of 500,000 Nigerian Nairas from Kola's account to a number listed only as Femi. The transfer happened at noon on the very day Ada died. Attached to the transfer message was a chilling note. As agreed, keep your mouth shut. Teo traced a number and discovered Femi was a former co-worker of Kola's in car sales. Femi had left under suspicious circumstances, rumors of shady deals, fraud. When Teo found him, Femi was jumpy and tried to shut the door in his face. But one flash of a police badge and a quiet promise of reduced charges for cooperation, and Femi started talking. Look, I didn't kill anyone, Femi said quickly. Tell me what you did. Teo replied. Femi glanced around the dingy apartment. Kola came to me a month ago, bragging that his wife had a big life insurance policy. Said she survived cancer, but was still delicate. He asked if I knew anyone who could make it look like an accident. Teo's jaw clenched. And I told him he didn't need anyone. Just wait until she's alone in the bath. Push her under. Simple. But I didn't think he'd actually do it. You took money from him the day she died. Teo said flatly. Femi's eyes dropped. That was for keeping quiet. He called me after, said it was done, and I should forget we ever spoke. Now Teo had something explosive. Proof Kola had discussed the murder beforehand. But it came with a risk. Femi was a criminal himself, easy for the defense to discredit. If they used him, they'd need to back his words with undeniable evidence. Teo pulled Kola's call logs for that day. There was 2 calls to Femi, one in the morning and one an hour after Ada's death. Combined with a bank transfer, the insurance call, the DNA, and the witness hearing Ada's voice, the case was becoming a noose. But while Teo was tightening the case, Kola was fighting back from inside his cell. The defense filed a petition claiming police harassment, demanding bail. They painted Kola as a grieving husband being persecuted by overzealous officers. When the bail hearing came, Teo sat in the back of the courtroom, listening as Kola's lawyer spun a tale of love and tragedy. My client cared for Ada through her illness, the lawyer said. He has no history of violence. The so-called witness claims to have heard words through rain and closed windows. The DNA, contamination. The insurance, a normal precaution for a married man. Teo could feel the tide trying to turn. Then the prosecutor stood. Your Honor, she said, we have evidence the defendant researched life insurance payouts, called the company a week before the death, and discussed killing his wife with a third party. We have physical proof of a struggle, and we have her voice in her last moments, pleading with him to stop. This was no accident. It was calculated murder for profit. The judge denied bail. Kola was sent back to custody. That night, Teo walked out into the humid Lagos air, the city lights glittering like broken glass. He should have felt relieved, but something still sat heavy in his chest, because he knew cases like this didn't always end with a verdict. Sometimes power, money, or technicalities twisted justice. And Kola was a man who played the long game. Teo needed one more move, something so irrefutable that even the slickest lawyer couldn't wriggle free from it. The answer, he suspected, was somewhere in the hours before Ada's death. If he could map her last day in detail, down to the minute, he might find a final nail in Kola's coffin. And he had just gotten access to something that might help. Ada's phone, retrieved from her bedside drawer. Inside, Teo believed was her voice. Maybe not in words, but in the quiet trail of messages, photos, and notes she left behind. If he was right, her phone would tell him exactly what she saw in Kola before the water closed over her head. Teo sat at his desk long after the rest of the team had gone home. Ada's phone plugged into his computer. The screen lit up with rows of messages, photos, and voice notes. He opened the most recent chat between Ada and her best friend, Zainab. Ada, 6:14 p.m. He's acting strange today. Too quiet. Keeps looking at me. Zainab. Maybe he's just tired. Don't overthink. Ada. No. This feels different. Teo scrolled further. There was a photo taken only 2 hours before her death. Ada had snapped in the bathroom mirror, her hair wrapped in a towel, bath water steaming behind her. The caption read, "If anything happens to me, it wasn't an accident." Teo's pulse kicked hard. He opened the phone's audio folder and found a short, accidental recording, only 17 seconds long, time-stamped at 8:03 p.m., right when Musa claimed to pass by the window. He pressed play. First came the sound of water splashing violently, then a woman's voice shaking desperate. "Kola, stop, please." The recording cut off abruptly, as though the phone had been knocked from where it was resting. The next morning, Teo called the prosecutor. "We don't just have a witness hearing her," he said. "We have her voice recorded in real time. This is direct evidence of her fighting for her life." By noon, the file was updated, and the defense received the new evidence. From that moment, The tone of the case changed. Cola stopped looking smug in court. His lawyer started asking for delays. But Teo wasn't satisfied. He wanted more. The voice recording proved the attack, but it didn't fully explain why that night. He dug into Ada's calendar app. There was an appointment scheduled for the next morning. Lawyer, property papers. He checked the details. The note said, "Transfer Mama's house into my name, then start joint catering business with Zainab." It hit him. Ada was securing property and starting a business without Cola's name on it. If she died before the transfer, the house would remain in her mother's name, but the insurance payout would go directly to Cola. She had planned to protect her assets. He had planned to kill her before she could. Armed with this timeline, Teo returned to see Femi. "You didn't tell me everything," Teo said, laying down the phone photo and the bank transfer record. Femi shifted uncomfortably. "I swear, I didn't know the exact day he'd do it." Teo leaned in. "But you knew he wanted it done before she could cut him out financially." Femi hesitated. He mentioned something about her making moves that would leave him with nothing. That was it, the final piece. Premeditation tied directly to a clear deadline. The trial date was set. Teo spent the days leading up to it preparing every angle. The jury would hear from Zainab about Ada's messages, from Musa about the plea for help, from the forensic team about the DNA and bruising, from the insurance company about Cola's call, and from Femi about the murder plot. But the centerpiece would be that 17-second recording. On the first day of trial, the courtroom was packed. Ada's mother sat in the front row, clutching a handkerchief. Cola, in a crisp suit, avoided her gaze. The prosecution laid out the story. A woman who had fought cancer, found love, and was murdered for insurance money by the very man she trusted most. When the audio was played, the room went silent except for Ada's voice. "Cola, stop. Please." A sound like splashing. Then nothing. Even the judge shifted uncomfortably. By the end of the day, Teo could feel it. The case had shifted firmly in their favor, but he'd been in enough trials to know nothing was certain until the verdict. And as he walked out into the evening heat, he caught sight of Cola's lawyer, speaking to a man in a dark suit by the court steps, their heads bent close together. Teo's gut told him something was brewing, something that could still blow the case wide open. If he didn't move fast, Cola might not just walk free. He might take the money and disappear forever. The morning of the verdict, the air in the courtroom felt heavy, like the whole building was holding its breath. Ada's mother sat ramrod straight in the front row, her hands clasped tight around her handkerchief. Zainab was beside her, lips pressed into a thin, determined line. Cola walked in wearing a gray suit, his lawyer by his side. He didn't look at anyone, not the crowd, not the judge, not even the jury. His eyes stayed fixed on the floor, as if he could block out the reality of what was about to happen. Detective Teo sat at the back, silently replaying every moment of the case in his mind. The bent drain cover, the blood smear on the wall, the DNA under Ada's nails, Musa's testimony, the insurance call, the transfer to Femi, and most of all, that haunting 17-second recording of Ada's last plea. "Cola, stop. Please." The judge's voice broke through the silence. "In the matter of the state versus Cola Addict, this court has examined the evidence presented by both prosecution and defense. The defense had tried everything, claiming the bruises were from CPR, that the recording was too short to prove anything, that Femi was a liar seeking a deal. But the jury had heard too many truths from too many angles for those arguments to hold. The court finds the defendant guilty of the murder of his wife, Ada Addict." Gasps rippled through the room. Ada's mother covered her face and wept silently. Zainab let out a shaky breath she'd been holding for months. "Cola Addict," the judge continued, "you are hereby sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole." As the guards moved in to take him away, Cola's mask finally cracked. His eyes darted wildly, his lips moving soundlessly. He looked toward the door, as though searching for an escape that didn't exist. Teo stepped forward, his gaze steady. "It's over," he said quietly. "Ada gets her justice today." Cola didn't respond. The clink of handcuffs was the only answer. Outside the courthouse, the midday sun was blazing. Teo found Ada's mother standing by the steps, her hibiscus plant cradled in her hands. She brought it from Ada's house for the verdict. She planted this herself. Her mother said softly, "I'll take care of it now." Teo nodded. She fought to live, and she fought to be free. We just made sure her fight wasn't forgotten. Zainab joined them, her voice thick with emotion. "Thank you, Detective, for believing she mattered enough to fight for." Teo glanced toward the court doors. With a last glimpse of Cola's gray suit, disappeared into a prison van. "Everyone matters enough to fight for," he said. Weeks later, Teo visited Ada's grave. The hibiscus now bloomed bright red against the green grass. He stood there for a long time, listening to the wind in the trees. Some cases stayed with you, carving their weight into your chest. This was one of them. As he turned to leave, he thought of her last recorded words. Not as a cry for help anymore, but as a final piece of truth that brought a killer to justice. In the end, the man who thought he could turn her life into cash had lost everything. Ada's story, however, would live on. Proof that even the quietest voices can speak louder than lies, and that justice, though slow, can still find its way to the truth.